You have such a passion. I've watched a few interviews, and your passion definitely comes across. So you're doing a good
Thank
job.
you. Thank you. It's just so cool to have an answer to how to stop a lot of desperate suffering. I feel like I lead a charmed life. I've, just been deeply immersed in this field for 27 years, and I know a lot about it, and I love sharing it. So,
It's got to be wild. I ran into your name in Jane Buxton's book, and I'm really eager to read some more of your work. I just finished
mhm.
Jane's book. I had to reread a couple of parts because it was so dense.
she
But
she definitely laid it out. I
yeah,
know which book you're talking about. It's it's just like things are just not what they seem.
yeah, and I dug into a little bit while I was reading her book on some of your work, and you talk a lot about food addiction. Now, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if food addiction's a thing, I would have laughed at you. But since
Hmm.
since a couple of years, as I've been spending some time educating myself on food and kind of what it does to our body and how or how manufacturers have laced it with chemicals to make it more addicting, I now believe it, and I feel like I'm kind of waking
Yeah.
up. Just don't know enough, nearly as much as you do. So I'm eager to learn what you have and what you have to say about everything. So what I
Here's the textbook.
that's the book on it.
Here's the text. This is a textbook. It's 240,000 words long and has 2,000 studies cited in it. It's like a reference book. Anything you want to know, if there's science on it, you can. I would, if somebody wants to get the Kindle so you can search it
Oh,
and you can
absolutely.
see what the research is.
How did you become interested into this field?
I had a raging problem. I was raised by two ragers and an older sister who was a rager. It was fighting all the time. The children fighting with the parents fighting with each other, the parents fighting. It was just a horrible household to grow up in. And I had then two little girls of my own, and I was raging at them, and I desperately didn't want to be. So I did therapy, and I did women's group, and I did 12-step groups, and nothing helped. I knew all about my childhood trauma, and it did not help stop the raging. And I was yo-yo dieting. And my children were born in 83 and 84, and it was 85 through 1988 when the tobacco companies came into processed foods and started lacing them with high levels of sugar, fat, salt, dairy, caffeine, food additives, gluten, and made them addictive.
Hmm.
So, what was happening is those substances were so destabilizing my blood glucose, my neurotransmitters, that's what was causing the raging. So, I was a yo-yo dieter, and at one point, a person in one of the 12-step groups I was in came up to me and said, "Why don't you try food addicts in recovery?" And I'm like, it's kind of at a thin moment. And I said, "Well, why are you telling me about food addiction?" But by the end of the year, I had regained the weight, and just like I didn't feel like I had enough willpower to do another restricted calorie food plan. And I went and got the book, and
Hmm.
it was about eliminating sugars and flours. And oh my gosh, I started January 1st, 1996. And within 4 days, the miracles were rolling in.
That
And what I
fast?
imagine is a lot of people in your community have experienced these miracles and not know why. So the brain fog stopped, the fatigue stopped, the bloating stopped. Um, I was eating a lot of food, but at the end of the week, I'd lost 2 pounds. And then the allergies stopped and the lifelong sinus infection went away. But it was in the third week when I realized that I hadn't yelled at anybody in 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And I knew instinctively it was about the food. That was the only thing that had changed. And we had only in person support meetings in 1996. But I had started this support group, and I went that weekend and I said, do people become less irritable on this food plan? There were 20 people in the room. Yeah. I just thought, dang, all that therapy, all the investment in that women's healing group, and I did all their trainings. And it was a diet issue. And I made a commitment in that moment to spend the rest of my life letting people know what processed foods actually do to them.
When you say rage, I immediately start thinking about road rage and wanting to fight. Is that the type of rage you were experiencing?
Absolutely.
Oh.
And you see, and today, well, I think these numbers come from 2018. Americans are eating 73% of their calories in processed foods.
Hmm.
And you see this really widespread deterioration in civil behavior. You have people taking weapons to school board meetings. Really? So, yeah, a lot of out of control behavior. And I just think that they're linked. So, processed foods create a very unstable blood sugar. You get this glucose high, and then you get a crash. And in the crash, your body is flooded with adrenaline to keep you from dying. Because if you don't have enough glucose, you're going to die, and if you have too much, you're going to die. So you have these defense mechanisms. At the top of the range, you have insulin to bring your glucose down, and at the bottom of the range, you have adrenaline and cortisol to bring it back up.
Hmm.
So when you get that flood of cortisol, it's a chemical reaction, but the behavior is can be violent.
I Whoa, I can't even imagine. What were some foods that you were eating?
Sugars and flours.
Like what? Like specific? I mean, this is back. You said this was in the '80s, right? '80s and early '90s.
Yeah, so anything that has sugar in it, sugar has been shown to be more destructive and addictive than cocaine.
Hmm.
So anything with sugar in it, like all the breakfast foods, all the breads, anything with flour in it, anything with gluten in it. Gluten has a gluteomorphine in it, and it has been shown to attach to the opiate receptors in the brain. It's a mood altering substance. It's a depressant because you get high off of it and then you crash.
So this whole
People,
time, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, this whole time I'm eating these incredibly mood altering substances without a clue.
Well, did you think that you were mentally ill while because it sounds like you tried to correct and address it with therapy, women's groups, so you had to be thinking to yourself that there's something mentally wrong with me, right?
I just wanted it to stop. I was desperate for it to stop. I would be raging. I'd be yelling at the top of my lungs, and I would bifurcate. I would be watching myself doing it, wishing it would stop.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. And I feel so bad for my parents. I went through years just hating my parents because they were so mean and physically violent. Like the belt would come out for when we were very small. You shouldn't be belting small children. And yeah, I did not want my children to have that kind of relationship with me, of course. So I just I want everybody to know that processed foods create really destructive behaviors. And processed foods impair every cell in the body. The membrane doesn't have really good fats to form a membrane. The mitochondria is overworked because so much sugar and fat is pouring into the cell. And then the cell can't clean itself. Literally, there's debris inside the cell that keeps it from working. So, I mean, this is the fun part of this, which is that when you get off of processed foods, a shocking range of things get better. Your mental, emotional, and physical beings all start working the way they're designed to work. We are designed to be happy people. We're designed to play a lot and have fun with each other and lean on each other. And that's how humans are designed. and it comes back.
What is
Frankly, I never had it, so I had it for the first time.
what
Yeah.
is your background in? You have a background in medical?
No, not at all. My undergraduate degree from Oberlin College is in economics and political science.
Hmm.
I worked for the Wisconsin State Legislature. My first job out of school was as a fiscal analyst. I decided I didn't want to work in government and I made the switch to business. I went to Stanford Business School I graduated in 1978. And I went to work for a corporation for 5.5 years. I married one of my classmates and we had these two little girls and I quit and I was really too sick with the allergies to go back to work. And when they were born, I started trying to stop the raging. I had married somebody who was raised by two ragers, so he didn't think it was weird,
Hmm.
but um, but it was.
I've never heard it described that way as ragers. Um,
You see people doing it now. Road rage, certainly. Uh, it's not just the raging; it's also the inability to process emotions and be okay. The gun violence, of course, is everywhere now. And these are people who don't know how to process emotions.
hmm.
And of course, they're seeing a lot of violence on TV. And they get to the point where it's their only option. But processed foods are, because they're addictive substances, they pull the blood supply away from the frontal lobe to the reward centers, these hyperactive reward centers, and a hyperactive stress system. And in that frontal lobe is where you're supposed to have attention span, learning, problem solving, um, memory, impulse control, and some emotional processing. So when you don't have blood flow for those areas, you can't do problem solving. And you have all this adrenaline in your system, you're absolutely furious and resentful. Um, I just think it's a factor. It's a factor in um, and I think it's a factor also when the police lose control.
Hmm.
We have this terrible situation in Memphis now where five police officers killed a citizen, and it happens all the time. And I think that even the police officers don't have great impulse control anymore.
I
Yeah.
al- I always like to think that processed food didn't become a thing until like the 70s, or I guess really the 80s. But the way you explain it was that your parents ate a bunch of processed food.
Well, they were on it. These are tobacco type tactics. So you create delusion around the product. And my mother was a very intelligent woman, and they persuaded her that modern women don't cook. She did make dinner every night, but the rest of the day was processed foods.
Hmm.
So even in the 50s, I was born in 1951, even in the 50s, there were plenty of processed foods. Our house was filled with processed foods. And, there would be breakfast cereal with juice and milk and sugar on the breakfast cereal, and toast and jelly and margarine. There was a can of Crisco in our house all the time. There was Velveeta cheese in the refrigerator on white bread. So that was my snack: white bread, margarine, and sugar.
So,
I had a sugar and margarine sandwich
well,
on
the
white bread.
the stuff that you've noticed over the years must be pretty mind-boggling to see how the processed foods have changed from the 50s to 2023, where basically all the food is processed food, even when if you don't think it's processed food.
Yes, yes. The way to tell if something is processed is it no longer looks like it did at the time of harvest. So this is a really good guideline. If you have a frozen pea, that pea still looks like it did at the moment of harvest. But if that pea has been made into a protein powder, you know that that's not what that looked like when it was picked off the plant. So it's easy. It's easy. You can go down like the bulk aisle and you can see that is a bean.
Hmm.
I can see that is a bean, but that is a gummy bear. And gummy bears do not look like at the moment of
My
harvest.
rule of thumb is basically everything on the inside of the store, the inside aisles are not food. All the real food is on the outside. The
That's
dairy,
the
the cheese, the meat, and all that stuff.
Yeah, but even cheese is manufactured by cows. And yes, you think, well, then raw milk is okay, but no, 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 no.
Hmm.
The original product there is the grass that that cow has eaten, and the cow has processed that grass into milk. And the reason why humans are not do not do well with dairy is because of the casomorphines. So when a calf has fed raw organic milk right out of mom, that calf is now supposed to go to sleep, lie down, pass out, because that cow needs to lie still while it absorbs nutrients. So you just think about it. There's enough casomorphine in milk to put a 100-pound animal to sleep. What are we doing ingesting that?
I never thought
It
about that.
creates brain fog. Yeah.
Hold on. So you're against all dairy then?
I'm not for or against anything. I just present the evidence.
Okay.
And then people have to make up their own minds. But once you know that there's casomorphine in dairy, and then you think, wow, and then that's concentrated into cheese, like a poppy is concentrated into opium. Hmm. And
Something.
then you can start to notice. So, what I tell people, if you want to see what a substance does to you, get off of all the processed foods Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday morning, sit down and eat a big chunk of just that. So, you want to see what sugar does to you? Just, get a bowl of sugar and eat that sugar. You want to see what cheese does to you? Just eat that cheese. You will be shocked at how sick you are.
Even that ask is pretty tough because trying to find food with no sugar these days is tough.
Well, it's just what you said. There's no sugar added to all the vegetables in the store, and there are hundreds of them. There's no sugar added to any of the fruits. Now, most people are too sensitive to eat the high sugar fruits anymore, like the bananas and mangoes and cherries and grapes. But um, yeah, there's no sugar added to the whole meat counter and the whole fish counter, and there's no sugar added to olive oil. So there's plenty of food in any grocery store, but you're right. Don't. I mean, canned beans, yes. Canned beans the bean still looks like it looked at the moment of harvest. Um, Canned beans, but really, the rest of it is drugs.
When you first transferred off processed food, you said it was 89 is when you did it, right?
1996.
1996. And
Mhm.
what was that first diet that you transferred off of processed
So
foods?
it was just eliminating sugars and flours.
Okay.
I followed a food plan. I followed a person who only knew about the sugars and flours, and they still allowed like artificial sweeteners, which are deadly. And over the years, I've done the research, and I know that it's any kind of sweetener, artificial, not artificial, any kind of sweetener is going to trigger that dopamine pathway. Flour triggers the serotonin pathway. The gluten triggers the opioid pathway. Excessive salt triggers the opioid pathway. Um, Dairy triggers the opioid pathway. And fats, processed fats, and too much, like too much lard,
Hmm.
will trigger the same pathway as marijuana, the cannabinoid pathway.
Oh, wow.
Caffeine triggers the dopamine pathway. And then you have food additives. So these are the same people who extracted and concentrated nicotine and put it into cigarettes to make them more addictive. And the FDA has not got the staff to really monitor content of food. So they could be putting anything in. Just never, ever buy anything in a package.
You mentioned artificial sweeteners, and I've said it 100 times myself, but you hear people say, well, it's sugar free. I can have this Diet Coke because it's sugar free. It's a little healthier. But
Right.
that's some wild marketing scheme for us to all say that. Like we believe saying it out loud to you sounds funny. Like, hey, it's sugar free. It's not. Like, I can realize that, but when you're in the moment and you believe the tactics and the marketing, they did a
Hmm.
wonderful job convincing all of us that it's a little
You're
better.
hitting on a key issue, which is messaging. 98% of your brain does not know how to filter a message. It just stores it as if it were true. The little tiny 2% of the brain that's the frontal lobe that can evaluate messaging. But the rest of it just gets stuck in your brain, and your innocent brain just pumps that message back out into your head when it's triggered to do so. But you're hitting on a great example of delusional, deceptive marketing, which is that somehow it's okay to drink those highly toxic sodas. And you see the exact parallel in the low tar cigarettes.
Mm. How did they
Yeah,
do that? I
so
mean, how'd they figure that out? That they can just change some words and bend them a little bit to trick us.
this is PR, it's marketing. Go back to the 1930s and 40s, and you see them making cigarettes sexy. Like there's Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart smoking and flirting, and see how sexy cigarettes are. I'm getting Humphrey Bogart. Yeah, and you know that they're disgusting.
Yeah.
They're repulsive. They're like the most not sexy thing ever. But if you believe it and you associate it, and the person that you're flirting with believes it and associates it, then oh, you're going to be smoking. And yeah. So it's that is the kind. Cigarettes are rebellious.
Hmm.
Like that's how they got women to smoke. It was the era of suffragettes. And oh yeah, if you want to be respected by men, just smoke like they do.
That's
Oh,
that's
and then you're
wild.
so sick you don't have time to rebel. So yeah, you've come a long way, baby. It's relentless.
Well, they
It's
even
relentless, very manipulative.
I even think about McDonald's when I was a kid. I wanted to go to McDonald's because of the toys. The Happy Meal is the cool little box. Even like the packaging made it cool. It was like a house. You know what I mean? And that's what intrigued me. And I wanted to go because of the box and you get a little toy with all the food, and so that's how they trick us.
Oh my gosh. So what happens there? The way so in 1963, R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco company, bought Hawaiian Punch, and they took these concepts, the tobacco marketing concepts, to new levels. So you remember the Marlboro Country Store? If you bought enough cigarettes, you could send in your purchase coupons and then get logoed items, right? So you could have a Marlboro belt and you could have a Marlboro lighter. So how that works is, of course, they were hiding extra nicotine in the cigarettes, and then so you would buy enough cigarettes to addict the brain cells. And why would you buy all the cigarettes? Because you could get these free things. So the free things, the Marlboro Country Store was an inducement, it was stimulation to buy enough cigarettes and smoke them to create the addiction,
Hmm.
because you've got all that hidden nicotine in there. And then when you get these logoed items, now you're surrounded by cues, by triggers, by reminders. So at some point, the addiction is not responding to the substance anymore. It's responding to a trigger that precedes the substance. So you're putting your hand in your pocket and you feel that Marlboro lighter, that triggers the craving. That that triggers the reward cells to flood the brain with cravings. So reaching in and touching your lighter creates the urge, just irresistible urge to smoke a cigarette. Now you're controlled by the addiction and by the manufacturers of the cueing, the triggering.
What kind of public, whenever you started learning this and starting to communicate what you were learning, what was other people's perceptions around you at the time? What was your family's perception?
Um, so that's a really, really interesting question. Before I leave the Marlboro Country Store, the tobacco companies made remember the mascot for Hawaiian Punch was Punchy.
Was it the glass, like the?
It was a Hawaiian character, like
Yes.
a
Oh, yeah.
nasty little guy, Punchy.
Right.
And then they took that same, so that's the same concept. That's addicting children to sugar. And then when Philip Morris came into and bought Kraft, they got oh, Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing there. They created the wacky warehouse. Like that takes real guts to name the addiction program after a mental illness. Wacky.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just in detail and it's chilling. It's so diabolical. But these are coming out of documents that the tobacco industry had to put on deposit at University of California, San Francisco as part of their settlement. And those incredible researchers are going through those documents and pulling together the story from inside the tobacco companies. Okay, so you asked about what happened like in my family. Well, the witch left and this nice lady came and took her place. So I was still working with a therapist and she said you have four rules. You're the queen of your household. So you're not going to take your kids to buy it and you're not going to pay for it anymore. And they're not allowed to bring it in the house and they can't eat it in front of you. I said, okay. So I sat them down. I had a list of all the clean foods. And I said, you guys circle everything that you like. I will make sure that those foods are ready to be eaten and in the house all the time. And then I gave them the list of things that were not going to be in the house anymore. And I thought there would be pushback. There was no pushback.
Oh
There's
wow.
mom, anything we can do to help you. I had so traumatized them that the idea that I would stop yelling at them and stop criticizing them was so just incredible. He said, Mom, anything we can do to help you. You want to get this stuff out of the house? We'll get it out of the house.
Do you think you were an extreme case? Do you think other
I don't
people
no no
fare
no.
better?
I don't. I think that people losing their tempers is well, we're what yes, we were in that category. So everybody reacts to these substances, but the reaction depends on I think it does the genetics there then have plus I had all this modeling. I was following the example of my parents. But some people go to depression and some people go to panic and then some people go to rage. Some people go to isolating and it's just the impact on the brain and the personality is so horrendous. And then they go to their medical practitioner and they get more chemicals and they get pharmaceuticals, which in a lot of cases just have these like 200 side effects,
Yeah.
like brittle bones and depression and lethargy and weight gain.
Hmm.
Really? Is that really the best answer? No.
You're listening.
So yeah, they were very receptive. Now, 27 years ago, if I talked to a doctor about it, uh, I remember I had a neighbor who was a doctor and I ran into him on the street. I was walking my dog and he literally laughed in my face. Not anymore. not anymore. We in our program we teach doctors. We have a doctors interface program where we educate their staff. They can bring case reviews to us. We'll review cases with them, and if they want us to come and speak to their patients, I will do that. If they want to get a group of patients together to learn about this, I will do that. And people, you know, 27 years ago, it was all about weight loss. And, 10 years or so ago, it was about, please stop this horrible behavior.
Mm.
Addictions get worse over time. So people were finding themselves binging. And, I have to get control of my behavior. I'm doing this crazy stuff. So it changed. It changed from weight loss to crazy behaviors. And now it's deadly diseases. So people are getting diabetes diagnoses and heart disease and cancer and depression, anxiety, and musculoskeletal, joint, bone, muscle problems that are very painful. And they're being told there's nothing that they can do about it, which is absolutely not true. So we've had the Addiction Reset community for 5 years now. It's an online community. We're blocking out the messaging from the corporations. We broadcast around the clock, 15 to 17 hours around the clock. So we broadcast and there's a break. We broadcast, we have a huge library of videos that I've made so that people can always, always, always block out this cultural messaging, just what you were saying. Oh, it's sugar free. It's great. No, it will kill you, just like cigarettes. So we're giving people like a protective helmet of messaging. We have trainings. We train our own people. We have advocates and hosts, managers who are all trained in deep, deep kindness and compassion and science
Mm.
so that people know that that's not your fault and that's not your fault and that thing over there, that's not your fault either. And this thing's also not your fault. It's not your fault that you gained weight. It's not your fault that you've thought about food incessantly your entire life. It's not your fault that you've developed this disease. It's not your fault that the bariatric surgery didn't work. It doesn't work on addictions. It's like, would you make your trachea smaller to quit smoking? No. And you can't make your stomach small enough to keep out ice cream.
Yeah. One.
So yes, that turns out to be the answer, and it works shockingly well. So all of these things that people say are incurable, they're not incurable at all. You just get around the right people and people whom you can follow, good guides, good models, good examples to get the processed foods out of your life, out of your house, out of your car, out of your body, and then bring bring the stress down so that you're calm in all circumstances. Stress diverts blood flow to the muscles. Your body is ready to fight or flee. And that means the whole rest of your body is not getting blood flow. So when you restore blood flow to your whole body by teaching people how to be calm, control emotions, control thoughts, you're in charge. You are powerful. You are skilled. You are equipped. And so you don't have to worry about things. You can work out problems and you get the processed foods out. What that means is that every cell in the body is now not just getting blood flow, but it's blood flow that's got lots of nourishment in it. And it's blood flow that's got lots of oxygen in it. And it has anti-inflammation and pro-immune elements because your body's able to make those things now from a nourishing diet. That will fix almost anything because all diseases are the result of cells, whether it's a liver cell or a brain cell or an ovarian cell. Those cells have stopped working. And so when you make it possible for them to start working again, it's really fun. It's really fun that all these things just kind of fade away. The key is to be in a community that you can access 24 hours a day.
That sounds
And that's speaking research, explaining to you why things are not your fault, giving you ideas, listening to your ideas and affirming that your ideas are great. That kind of environment, it's an environment issue. Um, I mean, over the 5 years that we've had the ARC, I've seen almost everything go away.
hmm.
So now we're starting a new community. It's called the Remission Optimistic Community. We'll use a lot of the ARC resources, but instead of focusing on the addiction, we will train people how to protect against the addiction corporations, but they'll also be learning a lot of other skills to put their diseases into remission.
While you were talking, that made me think of a sign that I saw on a Coke vending machine, and it
Yeah,
said something about balance. And you're saying, blocking out the corporate message, but Coke is now doing advertising. I'm sure they've been doing this for a while, but they're saying balance, and then they depict like drink Coke, but also exercise. So they're trying to say that we'll live a balanced life. You can have Coke and you can exercise. That's
it's so sick.
it's pretty genius though. Like you got to hand it to
It's
them.
so sick. Yeah, you can smoke as long as you exercise. You
Yeah.
can do cocaine as long you can drink as long as you exercise. It is so deceptive and it's so manipulative and it's so seductive because the addiction wants to live on. So, so I can continue to eat these toxic substances as long as I exercise.
Do
It's the
you
most devious thing. It's horrible.
do
Yeah.
you partake in any? Do you ever have Coke? Do you trying to cheat a little
No,
bit? No, you so
no, no, no. I quit smoking when my kids were born, and I quit sodas when about 6 months after I got off the sugars and flours. And I actually tried one some years ago, and oh, it tasted so bad.
really.
It's just like when you quit smoking, um, they stop tasting good.
Hmm.
You know that jingle, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should? And yeah, cigarettes taste horrible. And when you get off of it and your addicted brain is no longer in charge, the addicted brain will make cigarettes taste good. The addicted brain will make sodas taste good. But when you get off them and you get your taste shifted over to real food and you don't allow the addiction to transfer. So you actually train people to calm those reward centers. Because otherwise the addiction will just transfer.
W-
You'll be up all night reading romance novels, or you'll be gambling, or you'll be spending, or you'll be looking at porn, or smoking, or turning to cannabis, or prescription drugs. The addiction will transfer. So you have to get into an addiction recovery program and learn when something is just a little bit too exciting.
mm.
No, no,
You
I don't want something else to come in and uh, and addict me. The word addiction comes from the word to enslave.
really?
So in ancient times, a man could settle his debts with another man by selling himself into slavery. And that process was called the process of addiction.
I had no clue.
Mm,
You mentioned you said that addiction's kind of learned behavior, and that made me think of my kids when uh, we were gonna let them try a Coke for the first time. They're about 3 years old, I think, at the time, and they didn't like it. And
good.
at that time we were drinking Coke, but that's funny. That's like their natural response is that they didn't like the Coke. Or I think it was Sprite actually. Um, yeah, they didn't. I was kind of shocked, like, hey, how come they don't like this? But I think that's our first response. I think we're conditioned to want to like it.
We're naturally inclined to like sweet things because they're caloric. Like there was this incredible study. with rats where they addicted them to sugar, saccharin, cocaine, and heroin. So there was a lever that the rat could push. It had a choice of four. If they put the rats in the cage and gave them free choice, they would choose the sugar over the cocaine and heroin. So they took the sugar away, thinking, well, it's calories. And they would choose the saccharin over cocaine and heroin. So animals, all animals have just this kind of natural inclination to go to sugar because it's got calories. Flour turns to sugar in the bloodstream, but the rest of it's just drugs. I mean, yes, we do like salt. Um, the salt content of human blood is about the same as the salt content of the sea, the oceans. Yeah. So we definitely depend on salt. We need a certain salt level in our blood to be happy.
This
Rest of it's drugs.
this community that you're building, what are the do you have a large presence of the medical community involved?
We're getting there. So I don't like to go out with something and start talking about something until I'm absolutely dead certain it works. And I know why it works. And I have the research that shows when you do this, these things happen in the body, and this is the result. So now I'm ready. Really, in the last 6 months or a year, I've become ready to talk to physicians
Hmm.
and they're victims too. The physicians, the nurses, the therapists, the psychiatrists, they've gotten pharmaceutical and surgery training, and they've been told that that's the whole answer. There you go. And that's not true. Pharmaceuticals and surgery do not fix addictions. You need that surround messaging. You need protection from triggers. You need to let that brain calm down. You need abstinence. You need to get off the substances. And then you need to make sure that you don't transfer the addiction to some other substance or behavior. It's very specific. Addiction recovery is a very specific program. And it turns out to be the same kind of things that you do if you want to put cancer into remission or diabetes into remission. You're just filling your blood flow with nutrients, anti-inflammation, pro-immune, and then you're making sure your blood flow gets to all your cells. Fundamentally, at the very base, the root cause of the root cause of the root cause of the root cause is that your cells aren't working.
When you go speak to these doctors and these medical establishments, do they buy into what you're saying? Do they have an awakening?
Increasingly,
Yeah.
increasingly. So they're good at what they do. They're highly trained to do pharmaceuticals and surgery. And what we're saying to them is partner with us. We'll do the 24 hour. We'll take care of your patient when they wake up in the middle of the night and they want to binge eat. They just open their ARC screen, they get an oxytocin release, which regulates dopamine, and they're safe. And you don't have to face them, the next morning in your office, and they're just so distraught, and you can't figure out how to get them to stop binging. You cannot stop an addiction in a once a week meeting with your doctor. You can't even stop it in a once a day meeting. I had a daily phone call until I learned about Zoom. I had a daily phone call. That was not enough to stop a severe addiction. But as soon as we got Zoom and we had eye contact, and then we could break through the cravings and get the person to pay attention to what was going on the screen and cut off the cravings. So, yeah, increasingly, the doctors are very interested. So I was on a panel last weekend with, I don't know if you remember the actress Fran Drescher.
Yeah.
She was the nanny in the 1990s.
Yep.
Well, she had uterine cancer, and she embarked on a mission to let everybody know about cancer and cancer treatment and cancer diagnosis and cancer screening. So I was on she once a year she does a health day, and I was one of her 9 speakers last weekend. And I there was a doctor, a big deal colorectal cancer doctor in LA on the panel. And I thought, oh, I'll go and talk to him and see if he's interested in these ideas at the end of the day. And lo and behold, he zoomed over to me and he had his phone out. He said, "Give me your number. I want to text you." Whoa. They're desperate now. These doctors are losing patients right, left, and center, and they don't want to be.
Hmm.
It's not what they're trained to do. They're trained to be heroes and be all powerful and save their patients' lives, and they're not able to do that. So if he can get a patient over to our organization where they're protected 24 hours a day from bad messaging, toxic messaging, then they can recover.
I have someone close to me that is going through chemotherapy right now, and
Mm.
I asked them if the doctor mentioned anything about changing their dietary consumption or changing their diet at all, and he said that they didn't say anything. They said to eat whatever I want, and that kind of shocked me a little bit. Like today and age, like even if the doctor recommended going vegan, which I'm not for, but I think saying something right about addressing your what you're eating and feeding the body, because I mean I learned that cancer feeds on sugar, like with that,
Cancer feeds on
and you
sugar.
can kill cancer. I mean, not kill cancer, but you can starve cancer by removing sugar.
Removing sugar and breath work. So breath work is deep breathing. You can go into YouTube and put in coherent breathing and just it's 5.5 seconds in, it's 5.5 seconds out. It synchronizes your breath with your heartbeat, and that synchronizes with this huge nerve that goes through your whole body, the vagal nerve. And then the vagal nerve synchronizes other glands and organs. And then your blood is full of oxygen. So cells go back to feeding on oxygen. And cancer cannot feed on oxygen. Cancer has to feed on glucose, as you're saying. So you switch the cells back to feeding on oxygen, and yes. Plus, you have anti-inflammation and pro-immune agents. Your body will make its own immune system. Every cell is an incredible pharmacist. Every cell has little pumps in the membrane that pull in exactly what it needs from the bloodstream as long as the blood's full of nutrients. So Americans are eating 73% of their calories in substances that don't have nutrients. As long as you have that going on, and remember the stress piece. If you're stressed, if you're negative thinking, if you're mad, sad, afraid, ashamed, guilty, lonely, resentful, judgmental, then your blood is going over to your muscles, and every cell, and we have everybody's got cancer cells in their bodies. Those cancer cells, if the cell where it's some people think it's an invader and some people think it's a cell that gets sick, like it's a liver cell that gets sick. It's a liver cell though, and if you deprive that cell of overwhelming amounts of glucose and you give that cell lots of nutrients and you give it blood flow and you surround it with oxygen rather than glucose, it just starts working again.
This
We
community,
had a situation here in our own community. A person who had lived in a house with a lot of radon turned up last spring with a fatal cancer diagnosis and then got COVID. So they couldn't start treatment for 2 months.
hmm,
He had 2 months of chemo. This was a fatal diagnosis. And then they got another scan, no sign of disease.
wow.
Now, they were also doing a lot of things outside the arc. And that was the experience that really gave me the kick in the butt to start the remission optimistic community, is because you can. This whole thing that, oh, you'll have diabetes for the rest of your life. No, Oh, you'll have joint pain for the rest of your life. No, no, no. Oh, you'll have back pain for the rest of your life. No. Oh, you'll have depression and anxiety for the no, no, you won't. You don't have to. But you do have to block out. You have to put on your helmet of messaging, a whole body armor of to block out the messaging from the culture and the bad food. Bad messaging, bad food.
Are you reaching outside of the United States?
We are worldwide. That's how we can broadcast 20 around the clock in these blocks, and then we have a break and then another block. It's because we have trained leaders, people. We have an incredible training. It's called the ARC Manager Training. And we train our own people because this language where you're delivering compassion by explaining the science, nobody else is doing that.
Hmm.
If I can explain to you why scientifically it's not your fault that you gained weight, if I can explain the business practices that caused you to gain weight, if I can explain how the profit seeking exploited you and now you have cancer, if I can explain that to you, then you stop suffering because there's a lot of self blame. The culture doesn't know how to, the medical system doesn't know how to fix this stuff, so they just blame the patient. Oh, if you're going to eat better. Well, nobody explains that these corporations, these unregulated corporations, are preying on your brain. So we are worldwide, and we do train. We have an accelerated professional training. So if you work in a doctor's office or you are a doctor, um, you don't want to become a manager for us, but you do want to know how to talk to food addicted people. When I look at the research, I think over 80% of Americans are severely addicted to processed foods. 1 million Americans will die from this every year. That's 2.5 times more than the COVID deaths. So, yeah, we have people all over the world. Nobody in Russia yet,
Yeah.
but we have two Americans living in China and then we have Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, South Africa, all through Europe, all through the United States and Canada, a few people in South America and Central America. But yeah, it just the sun never sets on the remission optimistic community.
That's pretty amazing. Would you say, in your experience, that obesity, maybe not obesity, but processed sugar addiction or processed food addiction is more prevalent here in the United States than anywhere else?
Yes, so these are American corporations. They started out in the US. The UK is hit particularly hard because they didn't have the language barrier, so they felt comfortable going over there. And Australia is also hit very hard. And the Arabian Peninsula, because the Arabian Peninsula is occupied with people who have what's called the thrifty gene, and they just hold on to everything. You give them food, their body processes it and holds on to it. They're desert people.
Hmm.
And they've been living for thousands of years on very little food. So when fast food invaded Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the Arab Emirates, oh gosh, there are very, very high rates of diabetes and obesity.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's wild. Well, Joan,
it is.
I greatly appreciate your time. If people wanted to
I'm
follow
grateful
you
to you.
and get involved with your community, how would they do that?
Go to processedfoodaddiction.com, or if you want to come in a different door, go to remissionoptimistic.com.
Are,
Just don't give up. Don't listen to those people saying, oh, you have to live with this. Oh, go home and get your affairs in order. Oh, and your only option is surgery. Blah, blah, blah. No, there are dozens of other things you can do to make your body strong.
are you on social
Yes,
media?
thank you.
Are you on social media?
Oh, yeah. Food Addiction Education is our Facebook group. And look up Joan Ifland on Twitter and Instagram. We're everywhere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Joan, I appreciate your time, and
You
I
know.
learned a lot with you, so I'm thankful. Thank you.
All right.
You have
Call
a good
me
one.
back anytime.
Will do. Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care.